Next, we will have our outside counsel, Mr. Fisher, present the timeline, supporting evidence, and associated analysis relevant to the complaint. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman. Hold this down the whole time. Maria, will you wait for Maria? Is going to queue up this presentation. Can y'all hear me okay? This presentation is designed to do three things, really. It is designed to remind the board and those watching of what standards of conduct are at issue, so that you can keep that in mind as we go through it. The second thing it's designed to do is to provide a reliable and objective timeline of the events as they occurred on the night in question, April 26, 2024. And the third thing it's intended to do at the end is to frame the questions before you, applying the facts to the law in order to guide you and make it easy for you to reach your conclusions efficiently tonight. And that's really what this is designed to do, is to be objective and to guide you, and to be a tool for you in your decision making. So we can go ahead and kick it off. We know this, we've heard from the complainant, Martin Phipps, and respondent, Councilman Marc Whyte. The allegations were that Councilman White's conduct violated principles of ethical conduct set forth in Chapter 2, Article 3 of the City Code. The four provisions that the board accepted jurisdiction over are conflicts of interest, unfair advancement of private interest, prestige of office and improper influence, and finally, improper use of city resources, personnel, and time to further a private interest. You can go to the next slide. So I'm going to go over these for everyone's benefit. I'm sorry you have to listen to me read. The conflict of interest provision is found in 2-43A2. A city official shall not take any official action that he knows is likely to affect the economic interest of his or her spouse or family member. Official action includes any affirmative act within the scope of or in violation of an official's duties. Economic interest includes, but is not limited to, legal or equitable property interests in land, chattels, and intangibles, and contractual rights having more than a de minimis value. The second standard of conduct is unfair advancement of private interests. A city official may not use his or her official position to unfairly advance or impede private interests, or to grant or secure or attempt to grant or secure any person any form of special consideration, treatment, exemption, or advantage beyond that which is lawfully available to other persons. A city official who represents to a person that he or she may provide an advantage to that person based on the official's position violates the law. The next standard that's at issue is prestige of office and improper influence. In connection with the representation of a private interest before the city, a city official shall not, 1, assert the prestige of the official's position for the purpose of advancing private interests, or 2, state or imply that he or she is able to influence city action on any basis other than the merits. And the way that representation or appearance before the city is defined, it means before a city official or a city employee. So it applies obviously to city boards, but also to individual city employees. And the last one is public misuse of public property or resources. A city official or employee shall not use, request, or permit the use of city facilities, personnel, equipment, or supplies, or time while on city duty for private purposes, including political purposes, except pursuant to duly adopted city policies, or to the extent and according to the terms that those resources are lawfully available to the general public. Okay, so next I want to go through the timeline of the night in question. All this occurred in the late, basically within a couple of hours in the evening of April 26, 2024. At 8:19 and 14 seconds, dispatch, 911 dispatch, answers a call from Jessica Joyner placed to 911. At 8:22 and 26 seconds, the first SAPD unit is assigned to go to Mr. Phipps's residence on King Lake. At 8:22, 8/22/29, the first SAPD unit is shown as en route to the residence. 5 minutes later, at 8:27 and 18 seconds, the first SAPD unit arrives at the scene. So 5 minutes later, at approximately 8:30, Jessica Joyner contacts Lori and White, indicating that she has called 911. What you have on the screen are excerpts taken from Lori and White's affidavit that she submitted with, that Mr. White submitted with his response. She says, as for the night of April 26, 2024, I was out of town with my two daughters when around 8:30 p.m. I received a text message from Jessica with a screenshot of the text messages from her 13-year-old. Jessica also told me that she had called the police. At no time did she ever ask me to contact Mark or ask me to have Mark get involved. I then told her that I was going to reach out to Mark, who was at an event in the King William district not too far away from where Mr. Phipps and the child were located, and ask him to see if he could get more information and if there was anything else that should be done. That is exactly what I did. I contacted Mark to let him know how serious I believe the situation to be based on the information given to me by Jessica. Mark told me that he understood and would immediately notify the authorities so that we could most quickly alert them of the situation and get information regarding what was happening at the Phipps home. At approximately 8:50, Lori and White texts her husband, Councilman White. First line of the first text is, cops are at Martin's house in King William. Then proceeds to summarize what her understanding of the situation and says, we may need to get police chief involved. Martin has gates and everything locked and cops can't get in. Kids are hiding in back house. Police are saying it's not exigency. Call me now, please. Please call me. And then a subsequent text message, after she sends screenshots that she's gotten from Miss Joyner, she says, you have to impart on him how serious this is. Martin has a major drug problem and mental health issues. These kids have not been with him for 18 months due to his behavior. This was a trial run visitation, and that alleges that he's taken the phone away. She goes on to say, Manny can help too, I'm sure. Please give us an update. This is super serious. So 3 minutes later, records show that Councilman White places a call to SAPD Chief McManus. When the call is unanswered, Councilman White texts Chief McManus and says, can you call me? And includes a screenshot of the text message that he received from his wife. At approximately 9 p.m., Councilman White and Councilman Plies approach Sheriff Salazar, who's at the same function that they're at. Sheriff Salazar summons a deputy over to them. He's not on duty. He's working private security for the King William Neighborhood Association, running security in the area. The deputy had been to 303 King William already because he'd seen the SAPD officers there and had stopped there to check in and see if they needed his help. He ended up leaving the scene. So when he's called over by the sheriff, he indicates that he'd already been there. The sheriff introduces him to the two councilmen. Councilman White indicates to the sheriff's deputy that he couldn't reach Chief McManus and would like for the deputy to go back and to the scene and check on things. The deputy essentially turns to the sheriff, who tells him to go ahead and go back over there and check it out. The deputy takes a picture, uses his phone to take a picture of the text message on Mr. White's phone. And so that's what the deputy had on his phone when he returned to the scene, was a photo that he'd taken of the screen of Councilman White's phone. see from the timestamp, this was at 9:06 p.m., and this is from SAPD body cam showing the sheriff's deputy returning to the scene and mentioning Councilmember Whyte. I think we've got another shorter video clip from another body cam on the next slide.
Yeah, the compliment. So that was his text message? Yeah. You got that text message?
So the text message that the sheriff's deputy is referring to, he's referring to the photo that he took with his phone of Councilman Whyte's cell phone. That was at 9:06. Now we're at 9:26 p.m. Councilman Pelaez texts Chief McManus and Deputy City Manager Maria Villagomez. He says, Whyte and I have a problem. Please call Whyte ASAP. Family violence case happening now in King Williams. Mom of victim called us. Mom's name is Jessica Joyner. I'm told assailant is Mark Phipps. He gives the address. I'm told officers on the scene said that he was conducting, quote, reasonable discipline, end quote, on the minor. Minor claims he was hurt. At the same time, 9:26, Councilman Whyte calls SAPD Deputy Chief Salome, and when he doesn't get an answer, sends a text message, can you call me back? 9:31 p.m., Councilman Pelaez reaches out via text message to City Manager Eric Walsh. 9:26 p.m., Councilman Whyte texts Jessica Joyner, quote, we are on this. 9:43 p.m. is when the incident is officially closed by the SAPD. 10:09 p.m., Chief McManus responds to Councilman Whyte by text messages. Mark, just saw your text. Followed up with dispatch. 2 officers were on the scene and cleared at 21:46 hours, and the reporting officer will prepare an info report. Whyte responds, Chief, I really hope something doesn't happen. I can't believe your guys left. Tried you back. I'm here. So to kind of frame things in the context of the timeline, this is what their actions that were taken knowing the police were on the scene. So I think just as a reminder, the first text that Mr. Whyte got from his wife said, cops are at Martin's house in King William. So that was known at the outset. So what happens then is Whyte places a call to Chief McManus, Whyte text messages Chief McManus, and Whyte makes a personal request to the sheriff. And then after the sheriff returns his deputy to the scene, Pelaez reaches out to the police chief, the city manager, and the deputy city manager. Whyte reaches out to the deputy chief Salome. Whyte assures Joyner that we are on this, and Whyte expresses to Chief McManus disbelief that the SAPD Mr. Whyte has made reference to, both in his opening statements and in his pleadings, Chapter 261 of the Family Code, report of abuse or neglect in immunities. And just for your reference, that I'm summarizing and say that a person, any person, including certain professionals, who has reasonable cause to believe that a child has been abused or neglected, or may be abused or neglected, shall make a report to law enforcement, and they can satisfy that obligation by making a report to any local or state law enforcement agency. One of the things that has come up through this in the text messages from Mrs. Whyte indicating that she's looking for effort. We know that the police are on the scene, but she's looking for additional information. So we have this quote from Councilmember Whyte saying, calling 911, I don't think would have given me the information about what was going on. One of the code provisions that you'll be considering has to do with whether a person acts knowingly. And this is from the penal code, but it's also in your code of ethics. And this definition is taken from the code of ethics. A person acts knowingly or with knowledge with respect to the nature of their conduct or to circumstances surrounding their conduct when they are aware that the nature of their conduct or that the circumstances or that the circumstances exist. A person acts knowingly or with knowledge with respect to a result of their conduct when they are aware that their conduct is reasonably certain to cause a result. And I guess a simple way for me to lay that, I used to be a criminal prosecutor myself. You have to know what you're doing. You don't have to know what you're doing is illegal. You just have to know that you're trying to reach someone. You don't have to know that doing that may violate some local standard of conduct. So I just urge you to keep that in mind. Representation, this also comes from the Code of Ethics. Representation is a presentation of fact, either by words or by conduct, made to induce someone to act. Representation does not include appearance as a witness in litigation or other official proceedings. So in order to sort of frame this up for your deliberation discussion, this would be how I would suggest you frame these issues, or the questions that you ask yourselves and each other. This goes through each of the 4 implicated standards. For conflicts of interest, the question I would suggest is, did Marc Whyte take any official action that he knew was likely to affect the economic interests of himself or his wife? For the second provision, did Marc Whyte use his official position to unfairly advance or impede private interests? Did he attempt to grant or secure any person any special form of consideration, treatment, an exemption, or an advantage beyond that which is lawfully available to others? Did he represent to another that he may provide an advantage based upon his official position? For the section 247C, the questions to consider are, did Marc Whyte, before a city official or employee, assert the prestige of his position for the purpose of advancing private interests? Did Marc Whyte state or imply that he is able to influence city action on any basis other than the merits? And then finally, with regard to misuse of public property or resources, did Marc Whyte use, request, or permit the use of city personnel or time for private purposes and in a manner which was not available to the general public? So those are the questions that I would urge you to consider, and hopefully each party will address those during their 30 minutes. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. The complainant, Mr. Fields, will be provided an opportunity to make a statement regarding any evidence presented, but is not required to do so. Would you like to make a statement?
Would Mr. Fisher presented, or both parties, I'm sorry. I can make a statement now, is it like the closing, or, I'm not sure. I'll do whatever you tell me, just trying to.
Yes, this is your opportunity. Sorry, we got a
Okay.
little twisted up back here, but this is your opportunity. You have 30 minutes to present.
Thank you. I'm gonna go down each one, that way that, very quickly. It's unfair advancement of private interest. What was which I submitted, which is very important, is the recordings of Mr. Whyte with the reporter on May 15th and May 17th, right after this happened. Those recordings demonstrate that Mr. Whyte had no memory really of what happened. He said that, and this was before he knew anything was coming up, and he was worried about my daughter. And he basically said he texted one and calling one. We now know that Whyte's wife, Lorian, who is my wife's appellate lawyer, okay, and that appeal went on, and it's in my papers, started in the end of 22, lasted to November of 23. I unanimously won that appeal about going to arbitration. he says, White's wife's asking him to use his influence. Why else is she calling my wife? They know the police are there. And one of the things I wanted to bring up is how I am incredibly thankful that SAPD was there. White's tells my ex-wife, I'm on this. What is he going to do? My question is, what did he expect the Chief McManus to do when he contacted him, or saw me? And when his efforts didn't work, he went to who? The city manager, Eric Walsh, and the assistant city manager, who's over fire, and the police. The police have gone. They said there was nothing there. Okay, and I can promise you, I don't have any of their phone numbers, but that's not something any average person would do. Prestige of office and improper influence. Why did, I understand the photograph of the text message is what the sheriff's deputy says. However, the Detective Romo, put in his report that he read and wrote in his report that there was a text, look into me, Martin Phipps. Somebody texted somebody something, okay? Unfortunately, it's in the record, the Bexar County Sheriff's Office doesn't have any records of that. But that, they know the SAPD is there. Why are they sending other people to there? The body camera footage that we supported, the person coming up, the sheriff would say, we have an order from Marc Whyte. Why is Marc Whyte even doing that and involving himself in that? Because of the process that we have to have processes on calling 911, which we're all told to do, which has happened, so that we can make sure that the things that are done are transparent, so we know. Otherwise, things will happen and we don't have any control over it. White asked SAPD and city officials to intervene in private custody matter, and then there's accusation of drug use and mental health problems. She just throws in there. Where is that from? I put in my papers 10 days before this. I had to do an incomplete hair follicle, and it wasn't negative. It was 0. Okay, so they're trying to get a result they couldn't get otherwise. And if it wasn't for, I've said this before, if it wasn't for Detective Romo and the other 2 officers that came, I don't know what would have happened. And I can't, they're stand-up guys. They came out there, everything they did, we can see, to the minute. We don't have to dissect the text, we don't have to come up with a narrative, we can see what they did. And that's being transparent so we know what's happening. Public property and resources, White requested use of city personnel at time for private purposes. He's contacting city personnel. When you're contacting the city manager, which is not something I would do at night, or the city manager, you're taking your time trying to figure out what's going on. He's calling Deputy Chief Solomon, which I did not know. I honestly didn't have any idea who he was until this, because I'm just a regular citizen. And the conflict of interest, he took actions that he knew was likely to affect his wife's economic interest. I do not know their financial arrangement, if it was contingency or if it was hourly, but clearly they had lost. And for those of you who have not been involved in the family law system in the courts, let me tell you something. I am not a family lawyer, it's been an experience. But at least I can proudly tell you that there is a case. The case that I won is the first case in Texas history that says family law matters can be done in private, which is good for families. That's bad for lawyers, okay? And so their economic interest, they don't like that. And they don't want that to occur. As for the other evidence, I think that's really important here is that the narrative of his concern for my daughter, when did it start? Thank you. This is kind of a strange, San Antonio's a small town, I've been here a long time. I used to teach at St. Mary's Law School, the mock trial program. Both Mr. Whyte and Mr. Pelias were my former students. Both worked for me for a short time. As an ex-employer, all I can tell you is, I can't tell you why they're not there anymore, than I wouldn't hire them back again. That was a long time ago. I have not spoken to them. I really don't speak to them ever. And none of them, when you look in there, they know me. And when they say this guy named Phipps or this estate named Phipps, they know me. I'm pretty sure Mr. Whyte has been to my house. Okay? And this is the night for King William, so for anybody, I've been there for 20 years. There's a lot of stuff going on. So I just want to make sure that y'all are aware of that. It's all in my papers, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Councilman Whyte, would you like to make a statement regarding the evidence presented or previously submitted to the board?
Yes.
I'm sad. He was my mock trial coach at St. Mary's Law. He taught me how to go in a courtroom and try cases. I don't. It's hard to say it right now, but I don't hold any ill will against him. But what's happened to him, it upsets me, because this is not the person that taught me mock trial at St. Mary's Law School 20 years ago. There's a reason, and I'm only going to touch on this briefly, but there's a reason that his kids were taken away from him for 18 months by that judge.
That's not true. That is absolutely not true.
It says it in his own paper. There's a reason the kids were taken away. And listen, the one thing he says in his papers that is true, the one thing that he says is that
Councilman Whyte, I'm sorry to interrupt. I tried to frame up the issues for the boards.
yeah, I'm going to tie this in.
I know, I think the extraneous stuff, I think it doesn't help the board reach their decision.
I'm tying it in because you talked about the knowingly standard, and I'm trying to tell you about my mindset on that night when I'm standing there with the text messages. Okay, he says he doesn't know how I am right now. He doesn't know how I am with my family, and he's right. He's right. I don't know. I did not know on that night whether the drugs and all the other issues were still a factor with him. Okay? But it scared me. All right? And when you saw those messages from the little girl and knowing the history, it scared me for that child. And that's why I had to act and act quickly. Now, the questions that you put up there, Mr. Fisher, let's go through the code before we call in Councilman Police. Number one, did I take any official action on the night in question? And of course the answer is no. I was not acting. Ms. Joyner, her child, these folks, they're not my constituents. I wasn't taking any official action. Official action, as Mr. Fisher said, it's defined in the code, an affirmative act within the scope of or in violation of the official's duties. It was not within my duties that night to text Chief McManus or do anything. So I did not take any official action. That's why this code section fails. But it also fails for a second reason, and that's the economic interest. There is not one piece of evidence before this board that my wife stood to gain anything financially. You have the affidavits, the sworn testimony from my wife saying that her representation on that technical appellate issue ended in August of 2023. There's not one piece of evidence in your packets that my wife was going to gain economically. Ms. Joyner's affidavit says the same thing. The representation was over in 2023. And you also have the affidavit of Jim Monig, who is her family law lawyer. My wife's not a family law lawyer. She's an appellate lawyer. She handled a technical appellate point in 2023. That's it. So there is no evidence that I took an official action. There is no evidence that my wife gained or stood to gain economically. And that's why that first 2-43 should be dismissed. When we look at 2-44, I appreciated Mr. Fisher's presentation of it. I do think, Mr. Fisher, respectfully, that the word lawfully may have been left out of the presentation, because what the code says is I had to have done something to give a private interest, Ms. Joyner, some sort of advantage that was not lawfully available to somebody who was not an elected official. Chief McManus gives out his phone number at community meetings, as does Deputy Salome. Councilman Polias is going to testify to that in a minute. Anybody could have texted Chief McManus. In terms of Sheriff Salazar, I was at an event with 200 people. Anybody is allowed to go up to the sheriff or any deputy, okay, and say, hey, there's a disturbance going on around the corner. Please go check it out. I did not do one thing to gain any advantage for anybody that anybody who's a non-elected person could not have lawfully done. In terms of 2-47, I wasn't representing Ms. Joyner before a city official. I was giving information to Chief McManus, to the sheriff's deputy and Sheriff Salazar about what was going on and how serious it was, and trying to gain information about what was happening. Yes, I did know that, of course, the police had been out there. You could see it in the text messages. Ms. Joyner was on the phone with police. My wife said they're out there, and her text about they're saying it's not exigency, I didn't really get. I knew the police had gone, but we were trying to get more information and ensure that they knew the seriousness of the situation to protect the child. So Mr. Phipps says in his complaint that I told Ms. Joyner, or I told my wife, or I told Mr. Monty. He makes all sorts of allegations that I told them that because I'm a councilman, I could gain them some special favor. There is not one piece of evidence in your packets that I ever did that. And I cannot stress enough, please, you have to just look at the evidence. Both sides had an opportunity to submit it. I'm the only one that submitted sworn testimony from folks. Never did I tell them I could get them any advantage with anybody just because I'm a city council person. And the final code provision involves using city personnel while I'm on city duty, right? I was not on city duty that night, number one. Number two, I did not use or divert any city personnel. And you, of course, have noticed in his filings, in the first filing, he says that it was because of me that the police went out there, right? Which, of course, we now know, as Mr. Fisher presented, was not true. The police were out there because of the call of the mom. I didn't divert any police to the scene. Now, what I did do was, at the event, show Sheriff Salazar and the deputy the text messages. And folks, you all have in your packet the public statement from Sheriff Salazar, where he tells you what happened. And he says that Councilman Polias and Mark came up to him, he looked at it, and then he flagged down his deputy to go around the corner because he was concerned about it as well. And folks, you just heard Mr. Phipps's presentation, and at least 3 times he said, and then Whyte contacted the city manager's office. As Mr. Fisher has showed you, I never contacted the city manager's office. That was a text between Councilman Polias and the assistant city manager, Maria Villagomez, and Chief McManus. Councilman Polias texted the 2 of them, and then Mr. Fisher notes that Councilman Polias contacted the city manager, not me. I had no idea that he even did that night. I'm not sure how much of my time I've used. Are we let's call in witness Manny Plyce. May I get it? All right. Councilman Pelias, well, let me ask you this question straight from the get-go. Have you been at community events and seen Chief McManus give out his personal number to residents of San Antonio?
Yeah, I've lost count of the number of times I've seen that. In fact, he did that last week in Town Hall, about 150 people in my district after a murder that happened at an Airbnb. Assuming you may have seen that in the news. Stood in front of everybody and offered his phone number. He always says, and if you ever need to reach me, here's my phone number, and he hands it out.
Okay, thank you. Now, on to the night in question. You and I were at an event in the King William district, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And I'm going to hold this up here. And at some point on that night, I came up to you and tell the members of the Ethics Review Board what happened.
Yeah, it was a large party. It was hot outside. Everybody was outside. We're there with the Consejo Rafael crowd. I'm sorry, thanks. My wife and I were standing here, sort of between these two buildings, and Mark came to me, phone out, and said, "I need to show you something terrible is happening." And you gave me your phone. I looked at it, and he said, "This is happening at Martin's house down the street." And I said, "Okay, well, did you alert the cops?" And he says, "Yes, but they're not answering. What do you think we should do?" And so I said, "Look, Javier is standing right here in front of this column." And I said, "You need to speak to Javier Salazar. Let's go talk to him." I grabbed Mark's phone. I took it to Javier Salazar. I said, "Javier, do you mind talking to us?" And Javier said, "Sure, whatever. Let's talk." And we walked over to this column, to all three of us. And I said, "Here, look at this text." Javier looks at it and he goes, "Where is this?" And I said, "This is 2 blocks away." And he goes, "Okay, hold on a second." Flags down a deputy who was probably standing right here outside this fence. And he says, come over here. Gives the phone to the deputy. Deputy looks at it and says, "Yeah, this call came in over the radio. We're aware that this is happening 2 blocks away." And he says to Javier Salazar, "Do you want me to go check it out?" Javier says, "Yes, go check it out." And he says, "Okay," takes a picture of Mark's phone, and that's the last I heard.
Okay. Now, before you came in the room, Mr. Fisher showed the group here a text message between you and Maria Villagomez and Chief McManus, and then also noted that you had also texted Eric Walsh. Did I direct you to do that? Did I have any knowledge that you made any of those communications?
Yeah, no. It's something that I do whenever I have contact with law enforcement or something significant happens that I know may come to the attention of the city manager, the city attorney, or the chief. I always, as just a matter of practice, text them so that they can hear it from me. And so I'll say, "Hey, look, I talked to one of your sergeants at this substation, the following thing happened," or "I got a call from a constituent, the following thing happened." And I just like doing that to make sure that they're always kept in the loop as far as what happens with me.
And I think my final question, Manny, is that at any point that night, did you hear me say to anybody, Sheriff Salazar, the deputy, anybody, did I say, "Hey, I'm a councilman and this needs to happen, I'm ordering you"? Did I do anything like that?
No, in fact, you did not speak to the deputy. I exchanged words with the deputy. Sheriff Salazar spoke to the deputy. I'm the one that spoke to Sheriff Salazar. I think you told him it's just around the corner after we showed him the text. And that was it. The majority of the talking was done by Sheriff Salazar, myself, and the deputy.
And Mr. Fisher, if this is out of bounds, you tell me and I'll cut it off. But I do have one more question. You and I had a, for lack of a better term, a heightened concern that night for that child. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I have as soon as I saw that, that text message, I rolled my eyes. And,
I don't mean to Jack, but this is, I don't know what relevance this has, or what evidence this has in there, but they need to present something other than come out there and just make some accusations without any evidence being submitted whatsoever.
I haven't
Basically,
been
that's
answered
about
this.
my complaint. If you come forward, you're gonna just, they're just make, where's the evidence that's supporting it, this
I'm
testimony?
happy to give you some.
You have to provide it
I'm about to.
before the hearing. I'm not allowed to cross-examine. He didn't present, that has nothing to do with the issues of what happened.
Understood. We're gonna hear the witness testimony, but at this time, board, if you have any questions, this is the time to ask. Mr. Paul, ask the witness.
Do you want me to finish answering this question, or is that pass? Okay.
Does anyone on the board have questions?
I'm confused. Either Councilman Paez or Councilman Whyte, you were both aware, given that the deputy who had arrived at the party earlier had informed you both that SAPD was already on the scene. You had received a text message from your wife that Mrs. Joyner had called the police, they were on the scene. What was the problem?
Yeah, so I'm gonna push back on you a little bit. That's incorrect. So, Mark came and showed me texts, a screenshot of the text from the little girl. That's all I saw, right? And so I didn't know anything about where SAPD was. I didn't know anything about, what had happened before that one moment. Based on things I know about Mr. Phipps, I was very alarmed, developed a reasonable suspicion that something was really going on over there. And that's when I said, look, there's the closest law enforcement officer. Let's go show him. It's only after we showed the deputy the text that the deputy told me, told all of us, oh yeah, this came over the radio, the cops are already there. That was it. That was the end of the interaction between ourselves and the deputy.
I can answer too. Yes. I did know, per my wife's text, that the police had gone to the scene. She wrote about the gates, couldn't get into gates, and that the police said there's no exigency or something like that. So I did know that at the time that I showed the councilman the text messages and said what do you think? Well, what should we do? And again, the reason for that was, my wife's texts were I'm not sure very clear, but also to convey the seriousness of the situation. You saw in her text, this is serious, Mark. They need to understand, what's going on. And so I wanted to be doubly safe, right? And ask somebody that also is aware of Mr. Phipps's history, and then leave it to Mr. Salazar, to Sheriff Salazar, to say, what do you think? He then talked to the deputy, and the deputy said, I've been there, or I heard it over the radio, whatever it was. And then Sheriff Salazar made the decision to still send him around the corner. When the deputy said, well, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to go? Sheriff Salazar told him to go around. And I believe that's in his statement that I've provided to you.
How do you explain the notation made in the officer's report about the quote given to him that you look into Mr. Phipps?
Yeah.
Made by you?
And that was what the deputy said, or the police officer? Okay. Yeah, if the police officer said that I said to look into Mr. Phipps carefully, I never spoke to this deputy or this officer. I don't know where or why he would have said that, but I certainly said that in my text message to Chief McManus, right, I forwarded the text and told him this is how serious. I forwarded my wife's text, right, that said to tell the chief how serious this is and about all the problems. I never talked to any of the SAPD officers that were there on the scene that night. So I can't tell you why look into him carefully wasn't the thing. I certainly told Sheriff Salazar that this could be a very bad situation, and that's why I was bringing it up to him. And then certainly my text to Chief McManus indicated that I thought that this should be looked into very, very carefully. So I don't run away from that statement at all. I did want it looked into very, very carefully, but I never spoke to those SAPD officers or anything like that.
Go ahead, Dr. Gold.
Councilman, you have indicated, and the text that you received indicates that you were aware that the police had been called already. There was a 911 call to the police at the very beginning. That was in the first text. Okay. Why did you feel it necessary, knowing that the police were on their way or already there, why did you feel it necessary to engage all the individuals that you engaged in the conversation about getting someone else, or getting the police or the sheriff or someone else out there as well?
Yeah. So again, my text message with Chief McManus, first of all, I'll again state that Texas law says that if I believe something like this is going on, I have to report it, okay? And I can't delegate that to anybody else. I have to report it. So to me, I reported it to Chief McManus, and again, you see in my text, I don't ask him to send anybody out there, okay? I conveyed to him what my wife conveyed to me because we wanted them to know the seriousness of the situation, right? And then I wanted to find out what was going on. Is the girl okay? So that is why I reached out to Chief McManus immediately. When I didn't get a hold of him, I still wanted to know if the girl was okay and what was going on, and I still wanted them to know about the seriousness of the situation, all right? And that's why I found Councilman Pelias and showed him the text and said, you know, what do you think? And then upon his advice, we showed it to Sheriff Salazar, and then it was the sheriff that read the text message and decided, based on what he saw, to flag down his deputy and to send him out there. So it was never, you know, he puts in his materials, Mark wanted to remove my child from my house. He was trying to advance Jessica's legal interest and legal case and legal strategy. I don't know her legal case. I don't know her legal strategy. I've never talked to Jessica's lawyer, Jim Monig, about the legal case. It had nothing to do with that. I also wasn't trying to get a result. I wasn't trying to get the child removed. There is no evidence I was trying to get the child removed, right? I was simply trying to ensure that the child was okay and get that information as quickly as I could.
Did you have confidence in that the police that were on the site would not be able to get that information for you?
Well, I hadn't heard back, you know, from the police. At the time, you're talking about at the time I talked with Sheriff Salazar. I hadn't heard back from the police. All I had was the text from my wife saying, you know, the police are saying it's not an exigency. Maybe that was emergency. I don't know what they were saying there. The gates were closed. You know, so I didn't really know. I knew the police had gone out and I guess were there. I didn't know, though, what was happening. I didn't know if they had seen the child. I didn't know any of that. And so because we were there around the corner from where this was going on, and because, I mean, Sheriff Salazar was there and we showed it to him, and then really it was his decision. And don't get me wrong, like, I am happy that he told the deputy to go. And I did show my phone, to them. I was very, very concerned about this child and wanted information that she was okay, which I didn't have at that point.
Councilman Whyte, my question is, so you say, of course, for Texas law, you are to call law enforcement, correct?
Notify law
enforcement that a child is in danger or whatever the case may be. So at that point, sir, why didn't you just call 911 instead of reaching out to Chief McManus? Why not call 911, let them know the urgency of the matter, and then follow up with Chief McManus? I mean, I would think that would be the smart thing to do. And although you say other residents of the city of San Antonio, everybody has access to Chief McManus' phone number, how many members of the public are actually going to feel comfortable, if they have his number, reaching out to him at that time of night? And then my other question is, while you did want to know the status, you did have a little bit of an advantage because you were able to reach out to Chief McManus, asking him what the status was of the child. Now, if I call 911 or if I reach out to SAPD about a situation or scenario, I'm not going to have that advantage. But if someone like yourself is able to ask Chief McManus, you have a little bit of an advantage compared to any other person outside on the street, if that makes sense.
Yes, sir, it does. And let me answer it this way. First of all, I want to make sure we remember what the code says, right? And when you talk about advantage, it's did I secure an advantage for Ms. Joyner by doing something that was not lawfully available to somebody else, okay? And as you suggest, what I did was lawfully available to you or anybody else in the room, right? If you have Chief McManus's number, you can text him at any point and ask him for help, ask him for information, whatever it may be. The reason that I didn't call 911, Ms. Joyner, as it showed in the text, of course, had already been on the phone with the police, right? And so what I was doing was trying to, as quickly as I could, make sure that I got him the information about how serious it was, and then try to get information myself that the child was okay. So that's why I went directly to him like I did. And then after I couldn't reach him, right, and the councilman suggested we talk with Sheriff Salazar, and Sheriff Salazar telling the deputy to go around the corner. Well, at that point, that's faster than 911. I think we've been briefed that like 911 calls to get action and everything takes about 7 minutes. We were literally 2 or 3 minutes walk around the corner from the house. So my wife and I were heavily involved in CASA, right? Child Advocates of San Antonio. And what you learn when you get involved and you hear those terrible stories is that you can't be too careful, and time is sometimes of the essence. And so I wanted to act as quickly as I could. I hope that answers your question.
And Councilman Pelaez, I'm sorry. My question is, you say out of, you've done this in your past terms, you usually text the chief or the deputy city manager. I'm assuming you do that with directors, deputy directors, whatever the case may be. So when you were text messaging Maria and Eric, you weren't expecting them to intervene at any point or to, use their position to, reach out to Chief McManus, and take this issue make it bigger than it already was, or is, like you said, it's just something that you normally do out of respect for their office, correct?
Yeah, yes, correct. But remember, in this instance, simply because we're lawyers, family code obligates us and doesn't permit us to delegate that phone call or that contact with law enforcement. I can't say, you know what, 911 is already there, then relax. We're not allowed to do that. The family code says you must make that contact with law enforcement. And to be honest with you, I also contact Chief McManus, Maria Gomez, and Eric quite often on the phone, just so that I can avoid situations like this where people say, what were you thinking at that time, right? I like to have my decisions and my actions documented, and I found that the best practice is just to put it in text, so that if ever there is a question about what was going on, there it is. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Councilman.
And I do want to be completely honest and transparent. That night, I was not standing there thinking, oh, the Texas Family Code provision, whatever it is requiring me to do this, okay? I wasn't thinking about that night. I know that. I've learned that law, much prior. But that night, I was thinking about the child and what could potentially be going on in the house, making sure the child was okay, and getting the information as soon as possible.
We do have another question here, but kind of a straw poll. I'm gonna go a little bit off script here. Can I see a show of hands of how many people have Chief McManus's phone number in here?
That are not city employees, yeah.
Right.
I used to be a city employee for the police department.
I mean, I've broken bread with him, sat with him, been in many events. He's never given me his phone. I've been in this position, as you guys know, for quite some time. Just kind of putting that out there. Just wanted to kind of get a head scratch. So a little off script, and I'm known to do that. So thank you guys for your participation. Go ahead with your question.
Councilman, do you believe your wife had an obligation to report, and why or why not?
Yeah, I do. I mean, she is an attorney, and she does by the letter of the law.
Are you aware if she made a report?
She did not make a report. She contacted me.
One last question. When does the obligation cease
To
to report?
we would have to look at the code. I don't know that off of the top of my head. I don't know. We'd have to look at the family code.
I have a question. Councilman, like you said, you two are bound by law to report. Now, this is gonna be, I don't know, maybe I'm dumb, but why did your wife not choose to also report as well and call, or make any calls? I understand she texted you, but like you're saying, you all are bound by, sorry, it's law, right?
Yeah.
To make these calls. Why did she not herself as an attorney?
It's true. I can't answer that. She was with my kids. She received the information from Ms. Joyner. My wife and I, we always talk about things before we do them and act, and she was reaching out to me to say, hey, this is serious, what do you think? But yeah, she did.
Do you consider that there was a 911 call already made? So why do you feel that it was still an obligation for you to make that report?
Yeah, so again, if you go to the letter of the law that we're talking about right now, I can't delegate that responsibility to report to anybody else. So I'll say that. But again, I was not standing there on that night. I would be dishonest with you if I told you I was standing there on that night thinking about the family code, okay? Because I wasn't. I knew, I saw those text messages that Jessica had called the police, okay? I saw that, I read it, although I'll tell you that what was most memorable, of course, was what the child was saying. And I didn't have any clarity that the police had seen the child, that we knew she was all right, that they had gotten to talk to the child, or any of that, right? I just had that one text message from my wife that they had gotten there and the police are saying this, and I didn't know, and so I had, I guess, two choices. I could do nothing, and then, well, whatever happens, happens. Or I could try to do something and make sure that the child was okay and get that information as soon as possible. And again, you'll note, please note, from the text message, I never, and you know, I had the chief here to ask him these questions, but I never asked SAPD to do anything. Anything. I didn't ask them, I didn't order them, I didn't do anything. Right? I texted the chief the information that my wife had sent me, and I asked him to call me. The exact same with the sheriffs. Right? I showed the sheriff the text. Right? He looked at it, flagged the deputy, and the deputy went out there. I was in favor of the deputy going out there. I was. But I never asked or ordered anybody. And on that point, I do want to make this point. It's a technical one. But on this last code provision, you know, did I use city personnel for a private purpose? The answer, of course, is no. And I do want to point out that the sheriff's office, right, that would be county personnel. So even if you were to say, well, Mark, you got the sheriff's deputy to go around there, that still wouldn't be a violation of this section because that's county personnel, not city personnel. But again, I'll tell you that you don't even have to think about it that far because it was the sheriff, as the sheriff states in his statement, that told the deputy to go around the corner. And again, that's county personnel.
If I could.
I have one additional question. Councilman, you've made, several times you've made the comment that you wanted to find out how the child was. Is it customary for citizens making reports to receive additional information after the fact when they are not involved in an incident?
I'm sorry, is it
Customary for citizens who are not directly involved in an incident to receive information after the fact?
I don't know if I can, you may be able to answer it better than I can.
Can I chime in?
The answer is absolutely yes. So what happens when you call 911 or the non-emergency line, they'll ask you, do you want your name and do you want a callback so we can tell you what happened, right? And so if any of you guys were to call 911 right now, they'll ask you that question and you will get a call back from either the responding officer or their supervisor giving you an update. I'll give you an example. Recently, I saw two guys breaking into an abandoned restaurant. I called the non-emergency line and they said, would you like your name and your number to be given to the officer? I said, sure. And then the officer called me back to let me know exactly what they did. We arrested those two turkeys and, thanks so much. That happens quite often.
So while, Councilman, of course that is a standard, it is not always the case. I myself, there are times where I have not received callbacks from PD, and if, while you gave your name, I'm sure the SAPD, I'm sure they know who you are, so they are going to make sure they call you back. I know for a fact that they keep y'all's names to respond. So of course you're gonna get a response because you're a council member.
Yeah, so I'll push it back on you on that as well. These are actually measured metrics, right? And SAPD prides itself in making sure that they meet all of their protocols and that they meet their standards. If you didn't get a call back that one time that you called and you requested one, that's unacceptable, right? But I will tell you, they give calls back, right? And it is one of the expectations because the public wants to know what happened.
Yes, and I don't disagree that they don't give callbacks in general or period. It's just sometimes that does not happen, and whatever that case may be, we just can't say that it always happens. Period. There are times where you aren't going to get callbacks, and that's understandable.
Any other questions, board members? Yes, sir. Yes. Councilman Whyte, you have about 10 minutes left.
Yes, thank you. And I'll try not to use all 10 minutes. this whole thing was brought for revenge or to hurt me. And, you know, there's evidence of that in his filing. Because you all are I'm sure, aware about my situation, what happened at the end of last year with my driving incident. And in his filing, you'll notice the line in there where he talks about, oh, White had to be intoxicated upon information and belief, he says. And that is not true, of course. But just the fact that you would put that in that filing, an irrelevant line like that, shows you how this was designed for revenge and to hurt me. And it succeeded. Right? It succeeded. The multiple articles that have been written, of course, you know, the press here watching, it succeeded. But all I have now is all of you. And I'm happy to stand here as long as you want and answer every last question that you have. But all I have is all of you and your diligence in reading that code and looking at the evidence, because you cannot look at the rhetoric, you cannot look at, oh, this or that or happened, you know, whatever said. You have before you sworn testimony from my wife. You have sworn testimony from Ms. Joyner. You have sworn testimony from Ms. Joyner's family law lawyer, Mr. Monig. You have my sworn statements as well, and you have the sworn testimony today of Councilman Pelias. You also have the statement that Sheriff Salazar gave that's in your packet. There is no evidence that I was trying to take the child away from the home that night. There is no evidence that I was trying to advance Miss Joyner's legal strategy or impede his right to have the children. I come from a divorced home. I know how important it is for a child, if at all possible, to have a mom and a dad in your life. I pray, as I said to you earlier, the one true statement that's in his filings is that I don't know the personal situation now and all of that. He's right. I don't. All I knew on that night was that a girl was scared, said she was scared, said she was hurt, said the situation was not safe. And I knew that Mr. Phipps was involved. And I took the action that I felt was best and quickest to try to find out that that girl was okay. For the life of me, I don't think there was a more appropriate action that I could have taken. And the actions that I did take, they weren't to help any economic interest from my family, and there's no evidence of that. I didn't do anything, as we've shown today, I didn't do anything that somebody else could not have lawfully done. Mr. Phipps says that I used the prestige of my office, right? And he says in his complaint that I told Miss Joyner, hey, I can get you special treatment because I'm a councilman. There's no evidence of that. In fact, she testifies to the opposite. He says, I told my wife, I can get a special treatment. My wife testified that's not true. There's no evidence of that either. Bless you. And then using city personnel, right? He's had to change the story. In the first filing, it was that I sent the police out there. We know that's not true. I never used any city personnel. And by the way, the city personnel portion of the code says that I use city personnel for private purposes when the resources, again, aren't lawfully available to the public. Right? And so, again, calling Chief McManus lawfully available to the public. They're not city personnel, but just for the sake of completeness, talking to Sheriff Salazar, talking to the deputy, those are lawfully available to the public. I did not use or divert any city personnel that anybody else couldn't have. And so, I'm asking you, please, look at the language of the code. Look at the actual evidence that you have before you. Make sure to remember, of course, that I never contacted the city manager. That was Councilman Polias. He told you earlier I had no knowledge that he went and he made those texts. What I did that night was contact the chief. Was try to contact Deputy Chief Salome, and was walking up to Sheriff Salazar with Councilman Polias. I really appreciate your time and attention, and I look forward to your decision and pray that it's a dismissal. Thank you.
Councilman Whyte, I have one more question, I think.
Councilman, you said at one point that that night you were not on duty. Is that correct?
Well, I certainly didn't take any official action. Okay, that's for sure. A text message to Chief McManus is not official action. I was not at any point did I feel like that night I was acting like a councilman? No. I didn't feel like I was acting like a councilman. I was acting as a concerned citizen. I had information that a girl was in trouble, and I was trying to make sure she was all right.
So do you think that a call to the chief as councilman, but not on duty, would make a difference as opposed to someone else that called him? For example, if I called him,
Yeah.
or my colleague here,
Yeah.
Mr. Fisher called him.
Yeah.
He was not a councilman. Would that make a difference?
Well, I wish that.
Would he see you as a councilman, or would he see you as a private citizen?
Yeah. I wish he was here and he could answer that question. Knowing the chief, like I've gotten to know him over the past year, he is a guy that takes his job very, very seriously. And it is my belief, and I've never asked him that question, but it is my belief that no matter who called the chief, if somebody called the chief and said they had credible evidence that there was a potential child that was being hurt, my belief is that the chief would act immediately, whether it was me, you, or anybody else that called.
Well, on that point, would the chief have done this, intervene, knowing that already a 911 call had been placed and the case was being handled?
Would the chief have intervened if he would have gotten my text message? Is that what you're asking? I mean, because remember, I sent the text message and the chief didn't get it for like another hour or so, right? So again, I never was able to talk while this event was going on. I was never able to talk to the chief. And that's why you have the evidence. I never asked the police to do anything. Am I misunderstanding the question?
Well, you asked several people were intervening. What my question is, why was it necessary? I think I asked this once before, but why was it necessary to engage all these other units or all these other organizations when already SAPD was involved?
Yeah.
Was already looking into the case.
Yeah, so I'll push back just a little bit. I don't think it was all these other units. I mean, the police were there, right? And then the only other unit that was alerted to this was the Bexar County Sheriff's Office. And the reason that I first went to Councilman Pelias to see what he thought, and then the reason I was okay going to Sheriff Salazar, and I did want the deputy to go, because at that point, again, I still hadn't had confirmation that this girl was okay, right? Number one. And number two, I did want them to know, law enforcement to know how serious I believed the situation was. Those were the two reasons. They had to know how serious it was, and I wanted to know that the girl was okay.
Any other questions for the board member?
Councilman, forgive me, this may sound, but now while you say you wanted them to understand and know the seriousness of what may have been happening, do you not believe or think that while SAPD was on the scene, they would not have figured that out, that if something serious was occurring or happening, they would have jumped into action, or if they, my father's a police officer, so if he sees something is going on, he's going to assess the situation and do so. SAPD obviously could not see something was alerting, so.
I didn't know that if they had seen the child or not, okay? So that was number one, is somebody getting eyes on the child and that she was okay. And Mr. Fisher, I know you don't want me going into it, and so I won't, but knowing who was involved, seeing what the girl was saying, I was very, very concerned. And I would go further, but I believe I'm being told not to.
Well, I think it's we applaud the fact that you were concerned and that you did what you had to do. But my next question is, sorry,
I mean, please, any more questions about what I was thinking that night or what I did? I want to answer. I want to answer all of them. So.
No more questions, sir. Thank you, Councilman White.
Thank you.
Mr. Phipps, do you have any rebuttal statements at this time?
Yes, I do. For you that are non-lawyers, first of all, congratulations. You don't want to be a lawyer. But in cases, we have a saying, when you have the law on your side, you hammer on the law. When you have the facts on your side, you hammer on the facts. And when you don't have either, you attack the other lawyer. Trust me, I would love to respond to any of these things that they say. But it just shows the personal bias that these two people have that I don't care about in any way. They're not my district. I've had no contact with them. I don't want to be here until they decided to use their reasonable suspicion to get involved in my life. And I'm not here for me. It was my son's 12th birthday. He sat there crying, asking me, Daddy, why is this happening? I celebrated Christmas that day. So these men who are here, who have ethics, what is ethics? It's the aspiration that we are more, that we are better than this. Okay? I've never met any of you. I've never seen you. Maybe at the last hearing, I don't go out. This is my life, is I work and I have children. I'm not good at marriage. I apologize. I give up. Okay? But you sit here and what they do is they don't want you to look at the pink elephant in the room. And the pink elephant is You were using your office and your prestige to get a result that you wanted. My ex-wife isn't here, but I would have loved to ask questions. You were contacting a lawyer. Who was your lawyer? Because you knew Marc Whyte was a city councilman. And you knew Manny Pelias was his friend. And you knew they don't like me. But by God, reasonable suspicion by politicians is not the standard, but when they want to send people to your house to invade the most private thing you have, your family. You know what's missing here? What did the SCPD found? That they were wrong. I've had my children all summer. Her case was wiped out. But I got to explain to my daughter, whose name is in the media, that he has used. Why is her name in the media? If she had been injured, she would have been a victim. And they love to talk about they were trying to do the right thing. That is BS. You call 911. Okay? You don't go to the sheriff with no policy procedures and then send a deputy over there when you know SCPD was there. And I remember asking, why is there two people? I didn't know what was going on. I've never had a welfare check. I have sheriff's deputies during King William and First Friday, so my house doesn't get trashed, and it gets a little party down there. I don't know family law. And they did it because they wanted a result. And then when they didn't get it, when they didn't get the result they wanted, because the officers, we technically shown on the timeline, they were there 28 minutes. They interviewed my daughter. I said, go ahead. I wasn't trying to control anything. This happens in custody cases every day in Bexar County. That's the problem, and it's wrong. But these two men come in here and they disparage my name with nothing. Nothing. Now what's very interesting is that they talk a lot about me and very little about the actual facts. I don't have Chief McManus's phone number. Maybe some people do. But when you're texting him after it's over, saying, oh, I hope that girl's okay, and I can't believe they left, he's trying to influence the chief, who had the character to not do that. That's what we're missing. Solomon, Detective Romo, they sent a detective to my house. 3 officers. Why do you think they did that? To make sure it was done by the book. And he comes in here and says, I don't know how Detective Romo found a text message that says, look into Martin Phipps on there. Is he calling this man a liar? He's not. I sat there with those men after. I didn't know what was going on. And we know there's more to the story on this, that this is absurd. I'm sitting here, and I literally have no idea what's going on. I'm like, what is happening up here? What are these people saying? When you look at what's interesting is Manny Pelias says, I always let Eric Walsh and them know what's going on. Are you out of your mind? Read those texts. He went to McManus's boss, and that is the assistant city manager and Eric Walsh, who were smart enough to not even know who it was and not respond. Is that for my daughter, or because they want to get me and they want to change the result? Mr. Whyte, he cares about my daughter so much, he's never met her. He didn't follow up afterwards about anything. And he comes in here and he says, this is the standard we're supposed to have. When councilmen have a reasonable suspicion because they don't like you, they can get the sheriff to send somebody over to your house. I am telling you as God is my witness, if it wasn't for SAPD, and their professionalism and the principles that they followed, those sheriff's deputies were over there to get my children, to get the result they wanted. And if it wasn't for them, and these policy procedures, using 911, doing the things you're supposed to do and be transparent about, I don't know what my life would be like today. But I'm happy to report it's happy, it's loving, it's wonderful. But this here, it's a difficult thing to sit in judgment. And I've never talked to the media the first time, this last hearing. I do not talk to the press, I don't care. I think that's vanity. But they ask, what do I want from you? Just to do what you know in your heart is the truth. So that politicians don't do this. I am lucky enough to fight. I don't know if it's worth it. I'll be honest with you. I sat there and Mr. comes off, I'm like, I don't know if this was worth it. Because my daughter started school, someone's going to say something to her. what do I say? But you all can say a lot. Because you set the standard. And just like a jury you are the standard, you're gonna, that's all I ask, and I do, again, I'm sorry I got emotional, I have a weakness, but I truly appreciate the opportunity. I wanted this hearing, I didn't know the procedure for one reason. People say all kinds of things about other people in the press. In my experience, when you go to the courtroom and you put under oath, that's when the truth comes out. And that's what I know. And I don't respond to the rest because here is where we get to see the truth. Not in the soundbite of a narrative that they create that of course no one can disagree with. I appreciate your time very much and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pitts. I will now open the discussion to the review board. Members, for any additional questions to outside counsel or parties present, again, please raise your hand if you would like to be recognized. None seen. Mr. Pitts, would you like to make a closing statement at this time? You will have 5 minutes, although you may reserve time. Reserve.
I haven't had it.
Councilman Whyte, would you like to make a closing statement?
Yeah, thank you again, all of you, for your time and for listening to all of this. I do want to just say, I pulled up the police report, and the line in here that we've been talking about, Bexar County Sheriff showed a text message from Councilman Whyte advising us of 01, stating us to look carefully into 01. Again, what I think that means is I showed the text message. There was never a text, as Mr. Fisher has confirmed, there was never a text from me to any sheriff's department, and there was never a text from me to any police deputies. The texts were just from me to McManus, and in terms of the sheriff's department, I physically showed them my phone on the night in question. With that said, I won't take all 5 minutes, and I'll just reiterate that what I did that night. I mean, he's right. I mean, our kids go to the same school. I've seen his daughter, but I don't know his daughter. Our kids aren't friends or anything like that. We're not even, we see Miss Joyner at the school too. We don't socialize with Miss Joyner. We've never been out with Miss Joyner and her husband for dinner. We don't, it's nothing like that. This was about receiving information that a child was scared and in trouble, and doing what I thought was most expeditious in making sure that the child was okay. And if you all will stick to the evidence that's before you, the sworn affidavits, and the sworn testimony you heard from Mr. Polias here, and then you look at the letter of the code, which requires that I would have done something either for an economic interest in my family, which of course there's no evidence of, or that wasn't lawfully available to someone else. And of course, everything I did was lawfully available. Even if only 5% of people have Chief McManus's phone number, or 2%, it's still lawfully okay to have his phone number and to call him. So I didn't do anything that was not lawfully available. And then on the prestige thing, he says that I said that I could get favor because I'm a councilman. I never said that to anybody. Okay, and I shouldn't be penalized, by the way, for being a councilman. I mean, yes, I'm a councilman, right? But that doesn't mean I can't call the chief or go up to a law enforcement officer or ask a law enforcement officer to do X, Y, and Z, right? That's lawfully, and that's why the code is written like that, right? That I can't do something that's lawfully not available. Because, to one of your questions earlier, would the chief have given me special consideration because I'm a councilman? I mean, again, we don't know. He's not here to answer the question, but I can't help that, right? I mean, I just did what I was able to do, which anybody else could lawfully have done, and then everything played out as it did, which is I didn't get a hold of the chief, and in terms of the sheriff, we showed it to him, and he ordered his deputy to go around the corner. So, thank you again, and again, I'm asking you please to dismiss this complaint.
Thank you, Councilman White. Mr. Phipps, any rebuttal?
No, sir.
Thank you. I now declare this hearing closed. The board will recess into executive session. The time is now 9:21 p.m. on Wednesday, August 14th, 2024. The Ethics Review Board of the City of San Antonio recessed into executive session pursuant to Texas Code Section 551.071 and consult.
Yeah, I sent a message and, I'm mad we didn't get this video. I think we got it now. Yes. Yes. So just kind of, but.
You don't have to. At some point, it's a big.
We can really just turn it back on there.